Well, Mark, first off, is this your first children's book?
It is the first children's book.
And if so, why now?
You know, I do some things with the Hallmark Channel, and there were a lot of dog lovers on that. And I have been a regular on their morning show for a number of years, and I dedicated a book to my dog Stitch, and they saw that, and they love animals, and they said, "Why don't you bring her sometime?"
So Stitch is a real dog.
Not anymore. I mean, she died. No, she died 2 years ago.
Okay.
And so they said, "Will you bring her out?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll bring her out. If you fly her first class, I can't put her underneath. I'm happy to do that." And she died a week before we were supposed to go out. And so that was kind of when I got out there and we started talking in a pre-production meeting. They said, "You need to write a book about this." And
so that was the origin.
And that was the start of it. And it was a lady a dear lady who was the director of the Tonight Show for 20 years. And she said, "This would be great." And so that's how it started. I came home. I was still grieving the loss of a dog who became very important to us. And I mean, really important. And I couldn't get over losing a dog. And I thought I was a little offended by the way people were telling me that she crossed the Rainbow Bridge.
Yeah, I've heard that term a lot, the Rainbow Bridge.
And I'm going, it's a little trite, and quite honestly, it angered me.
Yeah.
And I just said, we get this idea that we're supposed to always have the answer for everything. And I go, I really don't know where Stitch is. And so that's how it kind of started. And so it's the same question I hear that people who have lost a spouse. I know my wife's in heaven. I know my husband's in heaven.
Looking down.
But where are
Smiling down.
Yeah. Well, where are they? But where are they?
Physically.
And so that's what I wanted to touch on, because my fear is that what happens when a child goes through just the trauma of losing a pet, we don't talk it through with them and allow grief to have its full effect.
Right.
Because there's a lot of lessons that can be learned out of that.
I mean, talking about loss with adults or grown-ups can be incredibly difficult in its own right.
Yeah.
And they're far better equipped to process things mentally and to go, they have the cognitive ability to kind of go through grieving and loss. But kids, I mean, they're still kind of learning things and figuring things out. It's much harder for them. How do you approach the subject of loss with the children in your life? Yeah,
you know what? I give permission for them to talk about stuff. I think we have a tough time maybe talking about loss in our own lives, because it may mean that life isn't perfect. And at the same time that maybe God isn't doing all that he can do to protect us from things. And I think so we kind of skirt over it real quick, or we want to fill that void quickly. Let's go get another dog and fill it up so we don't have to deal with the grief that we're feeling. Or we explain it away. And I think it's giving permission that it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to start showing some imperfections in our life. It's okay to deal with our own losses. I think that's where a relationship with God himself is the one who fills those voids and keeps us from filling it with other stuff that may be unhealthy or postponing the inevitable. And so the book is a very simple book about really a theological issue that of answering the question, do we have to know everything? But I think it's giving permission. It's okay to talk about the hard areas of life and not know the answers, because that creates a world of wonderment, a world of question, and where a child continues to search for answers that when we give it to them, they don't search anymore.
Yeah. I mean, is there a right way or a wrong way to talk to your kids about the loss of a pet? And I think about adults sometimes when you lose a loved one, you often hear this, well, they're in a better place.
Yeah.
But everyone's different. Everyone processes grief differently. But does that same concept hold for kids? The same for kids? I mean, is there a right or a wrong way to talk to your kids about this?
I don't know. I think you try to figure out whatever works. I mean, I would say when somebody says they're in a better place, I would say, yeah, but I'm not. It's they're in a place where they get to live forever. I know, but I still have to live with the loss that my dog is buried in our backyard, and I'm having a tough time getting over it. I think there's a part of it where we want to say that because we want to make it look better. I think God has given us animals where we can hold them as a pup, and then we can bury them at the same time later on in life, and we get to learn the lesson of about what life is all about. And so I don't know whether there's a wrong way. Sometimes I think there's a better way to help a child begin to understand that in their thinking, which is usually still concrete thinking, to try to share with them all these abstract ideas, it's hard. They can't assimilate that at all. And so at some point, it's just saying, yeah, the dog's gone. I don't know the answer. I mean, part of her is back here, but there's another part of her. I don't know where she is, but I know she's in my heart, though.
Yeah. Tell me about Stitch. I mean, obviously, this animal was important enough to you to want to write a book about, and the life lessons that came from having Stitch in your household. Tell me a little bit about your dog.
Yeah, you know what? My dog looked at me. If I could be half the person that my dog thinks I am, I'd be twice as good off. And there was Stitch was the end of a 42-year line of the same lineage of dogs. And we raised golden retrievers. We kept them, and, you know, they would die. And Stitch was that one that we were keeping that was wonderful. She slept in between my wife and I at our feet every night. She jumped in my truck and went to work with me. She was in the recording studio with me when we record all of our radio programs. She's spent time with, I live with 65 high school kids, and every one of those kids knows about Stitch, and so it was a dog that was kind of my, you know, one of these best friend kind of things. And so when she passed, it was hard.
It was devastating.
It was devastating. She became like our third child. And I don't want to sound like I'm some weirdo that you know, is consumed with an animal.
I think a lot of people treat their pets like that.
Yeah. And I mean, it just meant a lot. And so it was the response of people. But I was amazed at how much I was grieving. I grieved over this dog a lot more than I did over my own mom. And it was because I was so close to it. And I think the things that I learned from that dog were the things that I thought I'm going to lose, I'm going to miss. And I miss him, but I didn't lose him, though. I mean, because the way that she would listen gave me a great example. The way that she would love on people was an unbelievable example. The way that she would, you know, just spend time. I thought, this dog is here to teach me God's placed this dog in my life to teach me some things, and it did. And I know that sounds kind of weird, doesn't it?
I don't think it sounds weird, because we all love our pets.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a member of our family, as you've said already.
Well, and I've said, I'm 67 years old. I mean, somebody said, you're going to get another dog? And I said, I don't know. If I get another dog and it lives to be 13, I'm going to be 80 years old. And I don't think I'd be able to go through this again.
Yeah.
And so it was an easy book to write because of the feelings, but the idea is probably to spend more time trying to figure out, how do we help a child process? How do we process loss in our own lives?
Well, with that said, I mean, do you have any tips or advice for helping the children in your life feel comfortable talking about their feelings and processing death and loss?
Oh, yeah. You know, I mean, I think we try to shield kids from the death. I mean, and if it's an older animal that we're having to put down, then it may be good if that child's 8 or 9 years old or above to go with you and to do that with you, so then be a part of it. I mean, somebody goes, well, that'd be too traumatic. And I go, I've seen it where it's been a wonderful opportunity to open the door to talk about other things. I mean, to go out to the gravesite, if it's buried close, that you go out and let's go talk and say goodnight to Stitch or whoever it is. And it just says, I'm not afraid of this. This is a part of life. And it ushers in the opportunity for a child to start thinking, well, am I going to be gone one day? What about when Grandpa leaves?
That's a very good point. Yeah. I mean, that's the next logical step, right? I mean, you're learning to grieve over a pet. Now, does that translate into when they lose a grandparent or something?
Oh, absolutely.
Does it help that process?
Well, a friend. I mean, I think it's friends, it's neighbors, it's knowing somebody. We try to hide it. We try to make it prettier than it is, but actually there's a great sense of loss, and it's okay to feel those feelings, and that's where God intervenes. I think God helps us process, but he also wants us to learn. He wants us to learn lessons from those people and from those animals that he's placed in our life.
Yeah. A related topic, and this one has been bandied about by theologians and scholars for generations. And that question is, do all dogs go to heaven? There's been movies made.
Oh, I know.
That. Your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I'm okay with going, I really don't know. I had somebody tell me the other day that, oh, yeah, they will because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this. And she said, that's what I would tell a child. And I go, well, let me be honest with you. If I was 8 years old and you gave me that as an answer, I think I would sit back and go, what in the world are you talking about?
Yeah.
I go, and we miss the issue. We tried to justify it in some way and say, oh, yeah, to comfort ourselves. But the reality is I don't know that. And so, nobody likes a know-it-all. Nobody enjoys somebody that knows everything. And I think of the concept that it's okay to start telling kids you don't have to know everything as well. I mean, I think it's the love that you have for one another. It's the lessons that you learn of how to engage with one another. Yeah. You can gain all the knowledge in the world. And if you don't have that love, then you're like that clinging cymbal.
Good stuff. I understand, doing some background and research, preparing for this interview, I discovered that you dealt with grief around the time you were writing this book.
Yeah.
How did this book help your own grief as you were writing it? I'm dealing with grief right now. In the last 22 months, I have lost my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, 2 colleagues from work, my dad, and another colleague. It's been just an amazing run. No, I'm not looking for sympathy here at all, but it's been quite a run the last 22 months. So how did writing this book help you in dealing with grief?
I think it just helped me think it through a little bit, that it was okay to not know all those things. It was okay to reflect on an animal. It was okay to feel bad, as I did. My wife kept saying, "You're grieving," and I go, "Nah, I just don't feel right." I mean,
that's a good way to put it.
And I just didn't feel right. I felt that there was a hole that couldn't be filled, and quite honestly, it can't be filled. And we get this idea that it can. And so I think that's where you just learn. It's given me a greater appreciation for, and I've felt that with losses of other people in my life as well, especially with the pandemic and all the friends we've lost. It helps you appreciate loss all the more. It helps you appreciate life all the more when you've been able to understand the depth of that loss. And you know what? I think part of it is this too. I'm pretty happy that I woke up this morning.
Yes.
I'm up. And I'm good.
It's a very basic thing, but it's so very true.
It is.
Another day of life.
Yeah, and I think it's saying somewhere, you know what? It's going to be good. And just as if God can use a dog to teach me lessons about life, then surely he can use me to teach other people about life and have those discussions. Not discussions that are full of answers, just discussions that talk about, well, what do you think about this? Or how are you dealing with this? Or how do you feel about this? Or what's the one thing that you miss about whoever or whatever it is? I think those discussions just give you opportunities, probably more than anything else, to process. And if you're like me, a man that likes to process out loud, sometimes it's helpful for me just to talk about something. And I don't know whether I come to any conclusion or anybody gives me any answers. But the fact that I'm talking about it, I feel better afterwards.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point. Shifting gears to a broader question. You have 45 years of experience working with teens and parents. That's a long time.
Yeah.
What have you learned over the years that has surprised you the most about when you work with folks?
I think I've learned that all the stuff that I thought was going to be unimportant has really become more important. And the stuff that I thought was going to become more important really quite isn't as important. And here's the thing that I put it at. When I started working with kids, I was 19 years old, leading a Young Life club. And Young Life is just an outreach to kids. And I learned that relationships is key. Relationships. And so now that I've lived with 3,000 kids and dealt with thousands of families, and I've learned that relationships are key. If you have a discipline problem, you have a relationship problem. And the best way to move in and change the life of somebody else is through a relationship. And so now I tell people that probably the most important thing that I thought would pass is the relationship. And so when I meet with kids or spend time with families that are dealing with issues or whatever, it's the relationship that really gets them through. It's the presence of an example that encourages and cares and makes somebody feel like you can get to the other side of this, and we're going to give you some great tools to help you do that. And so that relationship component comes back into the equation that I thought would leave, and I'd have all these wonderful, wonderful ideas and thoughts. Well, it's just the simplicity of knowing how to love people differently, to love them in a very graceful way, to learn to listen rather than talking all the time. That's what I learned from my dog. My dog listened to me all the time and didn't say one word her whole life, but listened to me. And I thought, I think that's how I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to spend a lot more time listening than talking, and just listening, and that's it.
Yeah. Final question for you, and that is, after kids have read, parents have read, where's Stitch? When you feel like you've lost your best furry friend, what would you like parents and kids to take away from that reading experience? I mean, what's your greatest hope for this book?
Great question. That they would just have discussions about stuff, and that somebody would say, you know what, it's okay. It's okay to experience loss. It's okay to talk about loss. I mean, I deal with kids who are struggling through traumatic experiences in life. I mean, anything you can think of, just let your mind run wild, and that's what we deal with. And the number one thing is to say it's okay to talk about those things that have been so hard, because in the talking about them and identifying those things, then God does his work to come in. So my hope is, I mean, there's a story about a dog, but I think it's a story here too about that it's okay to let God do his stuff as long as we visit and open that door for him to be able to do what he's supposed to be doing.
Thanks for the time.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. It was great.